asylum, they are people who need our help. Our allies in the Biden-Harris administration know this and understand it. And so we have gathered today to ask the administration to seize upon the opportunities of this lame duck session to protect those most at risk in the years ahead. Alongside 37 of my colleagues, we wrote to the president to urge him and his administration to take the following actions. We urge him to extend and redesignate TPS for all currently designated countries. We urge him to clear the TPS processing backlog. We urge him to finalize the rule to provide auto extensions for work permits. We urged him to take immediate steps to prioritize the processing of work permits across all categories, and we urged him to designate special student relief, SSR, to Nigerian F1 students studying in the United States. We urged President Biden to answer our call, not because of any political purpose, but because it is simply the right thing to do. It is critical in this moment where so much anxiety over the rhetoric and commentary that we've heard from Donald Trump, raising the issue or the specter of breaking up families, many of whom are mixed status families, that we do everything we can in this lame duck session to bring down those anxieties. And there are, again, the things that I've enumerated under President Biden's administration that can be done with the signature on a pen. And so we urge President Joe Biden and the Biden administration to heed our call. With that, please let me introduce Mr. Niels Kinwani of African Communities Together as our moderator for today's press conference. Let me thank them for their leadership on this issue and for their refusal to turn a blind eye to the immigrant community. And he and his organization have my immense gratitude. And now I'll turn it over to Niels.
Good afternoon, everybody.
Good afternoon.
Thank you for joining us today. My name is Niels. I'm the Federal Policy Manager for African Communities Together. I want to emphasize on a few key points. As Congresswoman mentioned, the TPS program is a very important program for our community members. We know that the incoming Trump administration has a robust and hostile agenda toward all immigrants, including black immigrants. So TPS will protect our community members from deportation. We also want to emphasize that work permit is also very important to us, to our members, because that's the only way that our members can continue to contribute to the U.S. economy, to the U.S. society, and sustain themselves and their families. So without further ado, I will turn over to my colleague Sylvia, who will read a statement from Representative Barbara Lee, who was confirmed for this press conference but was not able to make it. So, Sylvia.
Thank you very much, Niels. My name is Sylvia Nyamuhungu, and I'm the National Immigration Organizer at African Communities Together. I'm going to be reading the statement of the representative who was not able to make it today. So I'll start. Let me begin by thanking African Communities Together for organizing this press conference. I want to be very clear. Many of us have already served through a Trump administration. We have seen the morally reprehensible decisions he has taken that put millions of black migrants in harm's way. Right now, the Biden administration is in a unique position to protect many of these black immigrants. President Biden must extend and redesignate temporary protected status, or TPS, for currently designated countries. Some of countries are particularly at risk as their renewal dates are soon. This includes Haiti, Sudan, South Sudan, Cameroon, and others. I also urge the Biden administration to take immediate action to clear the TPS processing backlog. We must ensure that all who are legally entitled to TPS protection and work permits receive both before the next administration holds power. We know that Donald Trump and his extremist MAGA allies have no interest in solving America's challenges. Their policies don't lead to border protection or increased safety for Americans at all. History shows that their callous approach only makes things worse, leading to inhumane conditions that are even violent. Before MAGA extremists pushes their racist, xenophobic policies, President Biden must do everything he can in his power to protect vulnerable black immigrants. I am proud to stand in solidarity with everyone today. Thank you for your work. Together, we will ensure that our immigration system reflects our nation's value. Thank you.
Thank you. So next you will hear from one of our community members, a community leader and impacted immigrant, Mr. Amos Fons.
Good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon. Yeah, and I wish to thank organizers of this event so very much. My name is Amos Fon and I'm from Cameroon. Cameroon has experienced a violent conflict for the past 8 years and counting. And as I speak, the situation is actually deteriorating. So the very reason for which TPS was granted to Cameroonians, that situation has worsened, meaning that there is no way that TPS for Cameroon can be cancelled now, or Cameroonians who are currently enjoying that status can be deported to Cameroon, because it simply means deportation to death. At my age, at almost 60, I have no business being in the United States because I came here when I was younger. I did a master's degree at the Southern New Hampshire University. I went back and I was helping my country, helping young people, working with the U.S. Embassy, helping U.S. Peace Corps in Cameroon as a consultant. But when the conflict broke out, that violent conflict at which I have suffered, I was abducted. It got really, really bad. I tried in the country for 7 years, but the last 2 years I just had to flee from Cameroon with my wife. I joined a community of people who are undergoing the same kind of suffering to plead that President Biden and his administration redesignate and extend TPS for Cameroon, because any Cameroonian, including those other people who are not yet granted it, if they go back to Cameroon, they are just going to death. I want to add also that I applied for TPS in November 2023. I went for biometric in December, and December seat. As we speak, 13 months after, I don't have a social security number, a work permit, no anything. 13 months. So if TPS for 18 months and then 13 months after application, you don't have any feedback, where are we going with it? So we wish to plead, I am here pleading that the backlog of immigration challenges concerning TPS be looked into promptly, TPS redesignated, and that no Cameroonians should be deported. I know it is possible. Above all, to Congress people, please, do not use any American taxpayers' money don't sign of it to be used in deporting people, because I know that immigrants are very useful to this country. By the way, America is a country of immigrants. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Fons. We have a few speakers that are running behind, and now we will hear from community leaders from partner organizations. Ronald Claude, Director of Policy and Advocacy from Black Alliance for Just Immigration, will be our next speaker. Ronald.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you. My name is Ronald Claude, and I'm the Director of Policy and Advocacy at the Black Alliance for Just Immigration. I want to say a very special thank you to Representative Yvette Clarke for her leadership in this space and continuing to prioritize the protection of Black immigrants. Today we're here because it's about preparation, protection, and pressing forward. We have to prepare our communities for the cloud that is coming. We have to protect our communities from the impact of bad policy that is going to separate families, impede folks from being able to put food on their tables, and most importantly, lead to deportations that will have irreversible harm to their family and the communities they come from. But we also must press forward. And that's why we're here today. We're pressing forward. There is something that can be done and should be done, and we're asking this administration to work with us to get it done. There is a backlog in TPS, DACA, EADs, you name it. But today we have the opportunity to press forward and to end that backlog by good policy in this lame duck season. So that's why we are here today. Secondly, it is important that while I'm up here, that we also talk about the fact that Black immigrants are not just laborers. Our capacity to work is not what defines us. It is the families, the communities, the language, the food that we bring into this world, into this culture, into this space. So we take this time to also remind folks that yes, we want EAD, we want a pathway to citizenships, but we also want to ensure that our families, our communities are able to stay whole, and that we remind folks that we belong to them as well. So we thank you all for this time. We look forward to working together with Representative Clarke as the chair-elect to the Congressional Black Caucus, and we look forward to working with this administration to do what is needed in terms of protecting Black migrants. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ronald. Next, we will hear from another leader in this space, Mbenga Ongunjimi, Executive Director for Nigerian Center. Benga.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much, Congressmember Yvette Clarke, for your leadership. My name is Benga Ongunjimi, the Director of the Nigerian Center. Thank you all for being here today. Today we gather a united coalition of advocates, community leaders, allies, to urge the Biden administration to take a decisive action on behalf of African and Nigerian nationals in the United States. Specifically on behalf of the Nigerian American community, we ask that this administration designate Nigeria for SSR and if possible even TPS before the current term concludes. This is not just a policy recommendation, it is a moral imperative. Earlier this month, President Biden made a bold commitment to the future of U.S.-Africa relations during his visit to the continent. He declared, and I quote, "United States is all in on Africans' future." I repeat, the President of the United States, President Joe Biden, stated that America is all in on the future of Africa. Today we are here to hold the administration accountable to this promise. We are here on behalf of Nigeria, an important American partner on the African continent, the largest Black immigrant group in the United States, and the largest ancestral home to Black America. America in itself is the largest foreign investor to Nigeria. This means that the United States has a moral obligation to ensure stability on the African continent and particularly Nigeria. And this commitment is not just in the interest of Nigeria and Africa, it is also in the interest of the United States. Granting these protections would align with the U.S.-Africa strategies towards sub-Saharan Africa, affirming a commitment to human rights, economic opportunity, and global solidarity. Temporary protected status would offer a lifeline to vulnerable populations fleeing armed conflict and humanitarian crisis. Talking about crisis, Nigeria is currently experiencing one of the most challenging periods of its economic history. Inflation has soared to record level, and the naira, the currency of Nigeria, has suffered significant devaluation. To illustrate, in 2019, one US dollar is worth 360 naira. Today, it is 1,664 naira, a staggering 362% decline in just 5 years. This has devastated families' ability to send money to cover their student parent tuition in the United States. These students are not just learners, they are the future leaders, innovators, and contributors to both the economy of the United States and that of Nigeria. Today, we call on this administration to act with urgency. Granting special relief to Nigerian nationals would immediately alleviate these hardships by providing work authorization and reduce cost loads requirements. These measures would allow students to continue education, remain financially stable, and contribute to the U.S. workforce in critical areas. Let me be clear, an unprotected Nigerian student today is a missed opportunity for tomorrow's global workforce, including the United States and that of Nigeria. The Biden administration's stated commitment to a just and humane immigration policy can and must include individuals who are ready to contribute to the country's economy. As the United States transitions to a new administration, we strongly recommend that this request be prioritized. The window of action is closing, but the impact of granting SSR and TPS would be profound for families and communities, and for those that shares the value of a nation we are turned to for opportunity and we are turned to for refuge. In conclusion, for those who need assistance, the Nigerian Center stands ready to help. If you or you know someone who needs immigration assistance, please have them reach out to the Nigerian Center. Our immigration assistance hotline is 1-800-395-9272. Let us not delay in providing these protections for Nigeria. Once again, President Biden said the United States is all in on the future of Africa. We are asking to live up to those words and immediately grant TPS designations for eligible African countries and SSR for Nigeria. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mbenga. While we wait for the other speakers, we will ask reporters to ask a few questions to Congresswoman Yvette Clarke. She has to leave very soon for voting. So if there are questions for her, please, you can go ahead. Congresswoman.
Congresswoman, can you speak to the pace of these designations for TPS in a Trump administration? Do you feel like it's now or never?
I definitely feel like it's now or never. There's not been the type of full-throated commitment to TPS, to DACA recipients, to those who are really challenged right now in between status from Donald Trump or his administration. What we have heard is about mass deportation. That has been stated time and time again. And when you look at his border czar and the incendiary statements that have been made by him about breaking up families, they can all go, basically. It sends chills up the spines of people of goodwill and good conscience. Any other questions?
What's been the Biden administration's response to your outreach?
Well, we've sent them the letter. We're waiting for their response. They have granted TPS previously. And so our hope is that they are examining this request in this moment and doing everything they can to expedite it. I'm going to return now the podium to Niels and thank all of the advocates who have come out here today. It's important because oftentimes people of African descent in the United States are seen as a monolith, when we know, in fact, that there's great diversity amongst us. I am the daughter of immigrants. My parents came from the beautiful island of Jamaica. And so I have skin in this game, literally skin in this game. I yield back, Niels.
So before the Congresswoman leaves, we're going to take a group picture and then so we can let her go back.
Everybody stretching. Is everybody in? Everybody in? You have everybody? Oops. Wait a minute. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, everyone. Thank you. Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you so much. Absolutely. Absolutely. My pleasure.
Pardon me, say it again.
Yes, Senator.
And why are you undocumented?
I came here from a civil unrest. I had no choice. My life was in danger. My mom told me the story when I was trying to get my driver's license.
How old were you when you came?
I came here when I was 7 years old.
What do you do today?
I'm a prosecutor. I represent victims of crimes and go after heinous people that have committed crimes against the Moran's family.
You've talked about Miss Moran's situation a minute or so earlier, but the perpetrator of the crime against her daughter Rachel would be the type of person that you would prosecute?
Yes, Senator.
I think there is a fundamental difference we're being asked to acknowledge here. Is there a difference between Mr. Touré and the animal who attacked Miss Moran's daughter? Of course there is. This man for a living is prosecuting criminals. This other individual is a clear criminal with a record. When we say massive deportation, should we consider them the same because they're both undocumented? Let me ask you this, Mr. Reichlin-Melnick. Most Americans, when you talk about the cost to the government in billions of dollars for this deportation, are going to say what most of us would fundamentally say, keep me safe. I don't care what the hell it costs. So is it realistic, if we're talking about a massive deportation, for us to be looking at federal budgets for financing?
I think it's important for people to understand that ICE already goes after people with criminal records all the time. And in fact, that has been the priority of the previous 2 to 3 or more presidential administrations, and is what Congress sets. So the overwhelming majority of people who would be the targets of a mass deportation campaign do not have criminal records. They are people who have been living otherwise law-abiding lives in this country, living, working, and in many cases paying taxes.
So you estimate, at least in one publication here, that the cost of massive deportation would be $316 billion?
At a minimum. In fact, if you look at it over the course of an 11-year operation, it could be as much as $1 trillion.
And that's for conducting sufficient arrest, detaining immigrants in mass, legal processing, and removal for those 4 categories.
That's right. And we're looking at hundreds of billions of dollars to carry out a deportation of 4% of the U.S. population.
So if you want to do a massive deportation to get Mr. Toure out of this country, you're talking about a massive amount of money that has to be spent.
Enormous sums.
And we hear from General Manner the impact it could have on our National Guard and military if they are given this responsibility. Have you taken that into consideration?
We weren't even able to account for the costs of the military, so you should consider our estimates to be conservative. The actual costs would likely be significantly higher because there are so many factors that we couldn't even attempt to estimate.
You write, to carry out over 13 million arrests in a short period of time would require somewhere between 220,000 and 409,000 new government employees and law enforcement officers. Nearly impossible given current hiring challenges across law enforcement agencies. Could you explain that?
Well, right now, ICE only has about 8,500 officers in the entire agency, and less than 1,000 are assigned to fugitive operations, whose job it is to go out into the community and arrest people. But because the overwhelming majority of undocumented immigrants have no interaction with the criminal justice system, they have no criminal offenses, that means that to arrest them would require going out into the community, finding them and rounding them up. And in order to do that would require an enormous investment in personnel far beyond any law enforcement operation ever conducted in the United States history.
So if we are determined to remove Mr. Toure, the prosecutor from Philadelphia, from America, and send him back to Sierra Leone or someplace like that, you're talking about massive amounts of money. If we are to focus on the truly dangerous people in this country to make sure that they are removed and should be, that is a lesser amount for sure.
That's right. In fact, if you look at data on ICE's own data, non-detained docket, which has already been cited by several members here, that is looking at about 1.2% or less of people who have any sort of serious violent offense. And of course, the resources involved there would be much smaller than trying to deport 13 million people.
Making a priority the dangerous people who are in this country or those who are here illegally and could be dangerous certainly is a much different assignment than saying massive deportations. Thank you, Mr. Malik. Senator Graham.
Does anybody disagree with the following statement? America has a right to limit how many people can come into our country.
No.
Nobody disagrees with that. Good. Mr. Toure, very successful life. You have much to be proud of. During the 4 years of the Trump administration, were you ever, anybody suggest you should be deported?
Thank you, Senator, for the question. No.
Okay. Do you support deporting the 1.2 million people who have been through the system, have a final order of removal? Do you support them leaving?
Senator, I'm a prosecutor. I go after...
No, I didn't ask you if you're a prosecutor. Do you support them leaving?
I support people that have committed serious crimes.
Do you support the people who have gone through the system, been denied, had their day in court, final order removal? Do you support them leaving?
If you have
as a prosecutor, as a rule of law person.
If you have committed a serious crime in this country,
that's not the question. So is it your belief that every non-criminal in the world can come to America?
No.
How many people want to come to America that are non-criminals? Probably hundreds of millions, and I understand why. It's a great country. So my point is, if you're not willing to say that we're going to deport you after you've had your full day in court, you're facing a final order of deportation, we're going to incentivize people to come forever. Mr. Melnick, is that right? How many people did Ronald Reagan provide amnesty to?
Estimates are roughly 2.7 to 3 million.
How many illegal immigrants are in the country today?
I said roughly 13 million of them don't know the exact
I would say
estimates.
that the last thing we want to do is give amnesty to people here now because we'll be overrun. Mr. Arthur, would you describe the last 4 years as mass illegal immigration? coming to our borders.
I believe that that's fair characterization, Senator.
Does anybody disagree that the last 4 years has resulted in mass illegal immigration directed toward America? Because if this is not mass, what the hell would be? Now, how do you answer mass illegal immigration? You start enforcing the laws, Ms. Moran said, and you start sending people back who've had their day in court. You can't answer the question, and I respect you. You've been able to take the opportunity to make something of yourself, but we're passing on just constant disorder. If you can't say you should be deported after you've had a full hearing, everything been available to, and you lose, and it's hard to say you need to go, we don't have an immigration system. General, how many people have been deployed to the border by governors to assist in border security from the National Guard?
Sir, I don't have that information.
Okay, it's thousands. Is that illegal use of the National Guard?
It is not the illegal use of the National Guard.
It's legal, right?
That is correct.
Yeah, I agree with you there. What's the largest cause of death in America for young people? Does anybody know? Mr. Arthur.
Drug poisoning overdose deaths.
Coming from a drug called fentanyl?
That is correct,
Mainly?
sir.
Okay, where does that drug come from?
That drug, reports indicate that it's made from precursors that come from the People's Republic of China, assembled in Mexico, and largely smuggled into the United States over the Southwest.
General Manner, do you consider illegal immigration a national security problem?
I believe that it is something that ICE and CBT needs to address.
No, I ask you, is it a national security problem?
I think it's a concern, yes.
Okay, I do too. And they're the highest number of people on the terrorist watch list in our country today. At the end of the day, the number of people being killed in America by drug poisoning is coming from labs and cartels in Mexico. General Manner, does the president have the authority to attack a drug lab in Mexico that's making fentanyl to kill American citizens?
I am not a legal expert, Senator,
Okay,
and
right.
I do not know.
So here's what I would say. I think we need to be tough, compassionate, but end this crap. If you're trying to poison America, you're a drug cartel, your days are numbered. We're coming after you, hopefully working with Mexico. If you've had your full day in court and you lost, it's time for you to go and try to do it right. We have to break this endless cycle of having policies that entice people to come to our country illegally, because that is the lack, we're losing sovereignty and losing control over our nation. There are too many people being hurt from this out of control system. So how do you deal with mass illegal immigration? You start with mass deportation of people who shouldn't be here. Mr. Toure, I think President Trump was pretty clear about DACA. But what do we tell the kids who've been brought here in the last year who are 7 years old? Do you ever break this chain? So I'm hoping, Mr. Chairman, that once we regain control of our border and try to shut down the poisoning of America, we can have a logical, rational discussion about dreamers and others. But until we control that border, until we get control over the crime coming into this country, into the poisoning of America, that discussion cannot happen. I've worked with you and others for decades to fix a broken immigration system. The way the Biden administration's handled this border problem has created a nightmare for our country. And there's a reason 70% of the people want deportations. It's not because they're mean. They want to bring order to chaos. Thank you.
Senator Klobuchar.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for having this hearing. And I know that you've worked with Senator Graham in the past on the Dreamers issue, and I hope that work continues. And I would start with what you said, Mr. Arthur, just about how we don't know yet how this is going to come down. And I do actually appreciate that Senator Durbin did this hearing, because I think we've got to start anticipating it and start having these discussions now. I personally don't want to have what happened last time when over a weekend I got calls from a family in Lebanon who was ready to bring their little baby that they had adopted to the U.S. and were stopped practically at the airport with a little kid with a flag sweatshirt on. And we were eventually able, through officials in the past Trump administration to get that baby adopted, and is now a thriving child in the U.S. And so Ms. Morin, so appreciate you being here and your strength coming forward. I believe there is a way we could do this right. I'm not certain how this is going to head, but I just want you to know that based on the work that was being done on a bipartisan basis at this last year, that there are people that want to get to this point where we get this order at the border, where we put the funding into enforcement, into things like Border Patrol agents. And this was legislation that I'm sure not everyone agreed with on both sides, but a proposed legislation that Senator Langford had negotiated that was supported by a number of people. And hopefully that can be at least a starting point for discussing it, even though it didn't go anywhere last year. And that was, increasing ICE detention capacity. It was looking at increasing border management. And I personally have taken a lot of grief for my support for COPS reauthorization and adding resources to law enforcement, which I think is so necessary with the fentanyl issues. But I think that there is a way. I note that in that agreement, that proposal that was made, as well as the proposal that Senator Rounds negotiated, that Senator Graham has been involved in the past on path to citizenship for Dreamers, on doing something about the temporary status people, on looking at people who have not committed crimes and what we can do to make sure our workforce is strong. I think there is a path here, and I'm just continuing to focus on where we can go. And I would ask you, Mr. Toure, and your story was moving in its own way. You've lived in the U.S. for 21 years. You're now married to an American citizen, have an 18-month-old son who's also a U.S. citizen. And I watched the president-elect's interview on Meet the Press this weekend, and he did talk about working with Democrats on the Dreamer issue, which I appreciated. But at the same time, then he talked about the only way not to break up a family is you keep them together and then you send them all back. I'm not certain he meant that with Dreamers, but what would happen to your family if you were sent back?
I mean, my family would face serious consequences. As I noted in my testimony, my wife is a U.S. citizen. Our entire family are U.S. citizens. Not only would this impact me on a personal level, but it would impact the U.S. citizens that have built their lives around me. U.S. citizens like my mother-in-law, who is legally disabled and has a brain tumor that requires her to take chemo in the United States. If my wife is not around to care for her, if my wife is not around to be there for her mother, it's gonna cause serious hardship on her life and potentially cause her to lose her life. And also, my brother-in-law has been serving in the Marines since he graduated from high school. He wants to re-enlist in the Marines next year. However, he has to choose between the love for his country or the love for his mom and come back home and take care of his mom. So not only is this impacting me on a personal level, it's impacting the people around us that have built their life around me. I've been in this country for so long, and to think that you can just remove an individual who United States citizens have built their lives around would not cause hardship on other people around them, it's just disheartening.
Okay. Mr. Reichlin-Melnick, could you go through just one more time the statistics, and then I'm out of time here, on if the focus was on enforcement, as well as the border and going after the people that we know have criminal records here, just that kind of money we'd be talking about if we wanted to focus our efforts on that group, as well as I would add to that, it's also going to be more border protection, which we know we need.
Yes, Senator. So we estimate that on average, a single deportation costs the U.S. government in today's money slightly under $24,000. So if we're looking at deporting 13 million people, that adds up to hundreds of millions.
I'm actually trying to get us to a solution that might work here. I remember when you were talking to Senator Durbin, and you talked about if you focused on the group that we know have criminal records that are still out there, how that kind of cost and what that would be.
I have to run the exact numbers for you. I'm happy to get those for you, but it is substantially less expensive than what President Trump has repeatedly said he would do, which is aim to deport every single person here, regardless of whether they have a conviction or not.
Okay, but so if we could get that and follow up later, because I think that there'd be some widespread agreement that if we're going to start somewhere, for one thing, we must begin with these most serious offenders that are out there and get the money set aside for that, do more at the border, try to do something positive here with Dreamers and people that are contributing so greatly to our economy, and trying to figure this out. We have tried this several times and had agreements with Democrats and Republicans in the Senate. Not everyone on the left, right, not everyone, but I'm just hoping we can get to a place like that. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Senator Klobuchar. Senator Kennedy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Arthur, you are with the Center for Immigration Studies, is that right?
That's correct, Senator.
And that's a nonpartisan think tank, is it?
It is, sir.
Okay. The border is an open, bleeding wound, isn't it?
That's a fair way to characterize what's been going on for the last 4 years, sir.
The southern border is chaotic by design, isn't it?
Yes, it is. I've been covering the border for 3 decades, and yeah, it's pretty chaotic.
Would it be fair to say that the broken southern border is man-made?
It would be fair to say that, sir, based on policies that have been implemented.
And that man's name is Joe Biden, isn't it?
That would be a fair assessment, yes, Senator.
Under President Biden, if you wait in line for legal immigration, you're a chump, aren't you?
When you look at the benefits that have been given to people and the speed at which they've been released into the United States, I would be chagrined if I were waiting.
You're a chump, aren't you?
Yes, sir.
General.
Yes,
You
Senator.
believe in open borders, don't you?
I believe in the rule of law, sir.
Right. And it makes you angry that President Trump does not believe in open borders, doesn't it?
Senator, I'm not here to discuss immigration policy. I'm here to discuss whether or not we use the military to enforce it.
And it makes you angry that most Americans don't believe in open borders, doesn't it?
Not in the slightest, sir. Again, I am not here to discuss the immigration policy.
Yeah. Duty, honor, respect, you talked about that
Yes,
in
Senator.
your opening statement. On October 14th of this year, you went on CNN. I want to read you what you said, make sure I'm accurate. Here's what you said. President Trump is not like any sane leader. I'm very proud of General Milley for saying that President Trump is a total fascist. To Bob Woodward, if he as chairman of the Joint Chiefs is calling the president a fascist, I'm so proud of him for breaking that barrier. The challenge is because most MAGA Republicans, they don't understand what fascism is. The reality is that they are in fact fascists themselves. Did I read that accurate?
Senator, I am happy to discuss my personal perspectives with you separately at any time. That's not the purpose of the hearing today.
Did I read that accurately?
I believe so, yes.
Yeah. You think you're smarter than the American people, don't you?
Absolutely not, Senator. I am here to discuss the use of the military as part of this mass deportation.
You think you're more virtuous than the American people, don't you, General?
Senator, I am insulted by your comment.
Duty, honor, and respect. You talked about that in your opening statement, didn't you?
Yes, sir.
Ms. Moran said I wrote down her words. She said, by their actions, you know what someone's character is like. You agree with that?
Senator, for 35 years, I served my country with absolute honor and distinction, and I will continue to do so.
You agree with what Ms. Moran said?
Of course.
Mr., we've got a few minutes left.
23 seconds.
Well, actually, you let Ms. Klobuchar go well over, so I'm assuming you'll extend me the
I'll
same.
give you the same minute I gave to her.
You gave it a minute 20. I timed it.
You're using.
I watch you like a hawk, Dick. Mr. Melnick, Mr. Reichland Melnick, you believe in open borders too, don't you?
I do not, Mr. Kennedy.
Okay. On November 1st, 2022, you tweeted, both Texas and Louisiana have their knives out for black immigrants. You remember that tweet?
I don't, but it's quite possible.
What Texans, it's not only possible, it happened. You're not denying it, are you?
No, I'm saying, referring to the context.
Who are you talking to?
I actually don't know the context.
Who are you talking to about who in Texas had their knives out for black immigrants?
Guessing the context, but my suspicion is that it has to do the Attorney General Ken Paxton and the Attorney General of Louisiana. I just did.
You don't have a name, do you?
I just said Ken Paxton.
You don't have a name, do you? You just said it, didn't you?
Just said Ken Paxton.
All right, how about Louisiana? You said Louisiana has its knives out for black immigrants. Who in Louisiana were you talking about?
Again, I'm not certain. That was 2 years ago, and as I'm sure you know, much has happened in the last 2 years.
Well, did you say it?
Again, I do not remember the context.
But you said somebody had their knives out from Louisiana for black immigrants, but you don't know who they were? You just said it?
I said the Attorney General of Louisiana and Texas, and I believe this referred to specifically lawsuits brought and arguments that were made in court that the arrival of Haitians
I'm out of time, but I want to get you on the record.
Thank you very much, Senator. Appreciate
that the Attorney General at that time of Louisiana had his knives out for black immigrants. That's your testimony.
Given their litigation
Senator Kennedy.
conduct, yes.
Okay.
Senator Hirono.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We have a broken immigration system. This was acknowledged over a decade ago when I first arrived in the United States Senate. And we actually, in 2013, we had a bipartisan, comprehensive immigration reform bill that addressed the issues of all of the immigrants who are working in various large sectors of our economy, i.e. in the ag sector, where the Chamber of Commerce are concerned about what we're doing with immigration policy, where we dealt with the undocumented immigrants who are working and paying taxes for which they get absolutely, you know, they're paying the Social Security, Medicare, they don't get those benefits at all. So we have a broken immigration system. We actually had the two senators who are sitting here, the chairman and the former chair of the committee, who are part of a comprehensive immigration reform. So I don't know why we cannot come to some sort of an agreement to deal with the massive, complex issues that confront us. So that is what I'm calling for. Until we make a commitment to comprehensive immigration reform, pointing fingers at the Biden administration or any other administration is not going to get us anywhere fast. And in fact, every administration has had border enforcement policies. You may not like the policies. For example, I certainly didn't support the Trump policy of separating thousands of children from their parents without keeping track of who their parents were. All I'm asking for is a rational, reasonable, humane immigration policy. So that was what I thought the comprehensive immigration bill in 2013 was. I didn't agree with all of the provisions, but some of us worked really hard on it, and Senator Graham, as I mentioned, was part of that. So that's what I think we ought to be focusing on. Now, a general manner, I'm glad you're here because we have a president who has said many times that he intends to use the military to do immigration policies, to effect his immigration policies. And General Manor, you said that that is going to have a very negative impact on readiness, for example, because our military, including the National Guard, they are not trained for immigration enforcement. So as the chair currently of the Armed Services Committee's Readiness Subcommittee, I share your concerns. By the way, maybe you can go over again a little bit more. What kind of infrastructure would be needed to enforce immigration deportation on up to 4% of our population? What kind of infrastructure would we need in order to effect that?
I have to defer to the other experts on the panel.
Okay, well, then that would be Mr. Ragnick-Melnick. Am I
Yes.
pronouncing your name? Would you like to go into some of that?
Senator, in order to carry out that form of operation would require hiring tens of thousands of new law enforcement agents. It would require building dozens, if not hundreds, of new detention centers, hiring thousands of new judges, all at a cost of hundreds of billions of dollars, potentially up to or more than $1 trillion over the course of more than a decade.
Do you support comprehensive immigration reform?
I do.
Does anybody on this panel not support comprehensive immigration reform that really gets to some of the problem, well, that really addresses the issues that we're facing? Anybody on the panel?
Senator, I have to say, comprehensive immigration reform is not a defined term, and as with all legislation, the devil's in the detail.
Excuse me, you can look at the 2013 bill, and that had some of the kinds of, that would be what I would describe as comprehensive. It was not the answer, it was not the be-all and end-all, but it was pretty comprehensive, wouldn't you say?
I was actually on the bench at the time that bill was introduced. I was an immigration judge and not involved in legislation.
Well, it was, trust me when I say that, it was about as comprehensive immigration reform as we have managed to do in over a decade at this point. And that's more, I think, what we need to do. And I don't think there's anybody here who supports something called the open borders, because as I said, every single administration has had border enforcement policy. You may not agree with all of that. I don't think there's anybody sitting here who supports open borders, whatever the heck that means. But we all know that we need to have border control. We need that. But what are we going to do about the 11 million to 13 million undocumented people here who are very much a part of our community and the fabric of many, many communities, not to mention that there are U.S. citizens that are part of their families? And are we going to start busting them up? What's that going to do? So, you know, before we start throwing out all kinds of so-called solutions, I think we need to think about what are we going to do to have a rational, reasonable immigration policy, and that's what I'm calling for. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Rono. Senator Blackburn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you to each of you for being here today. Ms. Morin, I am so sorry for your loss. I know that's been a very difficult time for you and your family, and this truly is a season of sorrow for you all, and I recognize that. I find it so interesting. This open border policy that we've seen is not a compassionate policy. I've talked to people that work with human trafficking and sex trafficking, and what is happening to women and children is abhorrent. And we all are fully aware of that. Mr. Chairman, I appreciated your remark that we should deport those that are truly a danger to Americans. I think that's accurate. I don't think there's anyone would disagree with that. We've all seen the uptick in violent crimes, such as Ms. Morin and her family have experienced. And this is the reason I reintroduced my CLEAR Act this year, which would enable local law enforcement, when they apprehend someone who's in the country illegally, to detain them and then call on ICE to deport them. And then the federal government have to repay that local law enforcement agency for what they've spent in that apprehension, that detention. And we should pass this bill today. And that would be a good thing for this committee to be doing this last week. Pull it up, put it on the hotline, and run it. Is there anybody on this panel that disagrees with deporting criminal illegal aliens? Raise your hand if you disagree with that. Everybody agrees those that have committed crimes against our citizens should be deported. Mr. Arthur, I want to come to you. Talk for just 1 minute about why it is important that we empower local law enforcement to carry out the job that the federal government has not done.
Well, you actually heard Mr. Reichlin-Melnick talk about how few ICE enforcement removal officers there are. There's always going to be a set number of those individuals. When you allow police officers who are involved in their community, who are the first line, actually putting hands on criminals, they're going to be the people who are best able to pull those individuals out of the community. And it's important to note, Senator, that when you talk about immigrant crime, Ms. Morin's situation is horrible, and every crime is horrible. So much of that immigrant crime takes place in immigrant communities. Sanctuary jurisdictions do nothing but punish the immigrants that those individuals that live in those communities that those criminals are sent back to. So that's why it's absolutely crucial.
I appreciate that. So I think we should move forward with my legislation, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Reichlin-Melnick, I'd like to come to you. I want to talk about some of your tweets. You've been active on X. Here's one. This is bad analysis that bears little resemblance to the facts. The Remain in Mexico program was not very successful. It was a human rights disaster that fed people to the cartels with not much impact on border crossings. Plus, Biden ended it when it was barely in use at all. So
that's correct.
Let's talk about that. So do you still believe that Remain in Mexico was not very successful?
It wasn't. In fact, it was one of a suite of programs that went into effect in 2019, about 4 or 5 different ones over the course of about 8 months.
Do you believe it was a human rights disaster?
Yes, and I can tell you the stories of the women sent back by the United States to Mexico who were raped in Mexico because of that.
People that were raped along the way, people that have been trafficked.
And we sent them back to those traffickers. Remain in Mexico gave people to the cartels, and we turned our eyes away from them.
Remain in Mexico was successful, and we all know it. Now, let me talk to you about another tweet that you put up. There are not 320,000 missing children.
That's correct.
That number is a false interpretation of a DHS OIG report that said that 32,000 people who entered as unaccompanied children from 2019 to 2023 were ordered deported for missing court, and ICE failed to file charging documents for 291,000 more.
That's right.
Now,
that's an accurate description of the OIG report.
This is a human rights disaster because what we have heard is the DHS Inspector General, and what they have testified is that they found 32,000 migrant children did not show up for their court date, and an additional 291,000 migrant children never received notices to appear.
That's correct. That's what my tweet said.
Is it your testimony that DHS does in fact know the whereabouts of every single one of these 320,000 children, and they're just not telling people where these children are?
No, because that's not DHS's function here. It's also Office of Refugee Resettlement. It's
it is
not their job
DHS
to go out and find every single people.
It is DHS and ORR.
I guess the broader point is somebody isn't missing if no one's looking for them.
What we know is that through reports that have been made, reporting even the New York Times, many of these children are in abusive situations. They are working in plants, and indeed, DHS says that you've got this 320,000 migrant children that cannot be located. That is a human rights disaster. I yield that.
Senator Blackburn, they did not say they can't be located. They said that they had not even attempted to file
My time has
charging
expired. I
documents,
yield
which
back,
is a very
Mr.
different
Chairman.
thing.
I'm going to give the witness an opportunity to finish his remarks.
I just want to know, the DHS report did not say these children were missing. It said that ICE had failed on the job to actually start the court process for them. If ICE filed the court documents, many of those people would be living at the exact address that the ICE told them. It's just ICE has not filed the charging documents. It's not that they're missing. And of course, exploitation is very real, and we've called for more labor enforcement to ensure it doesn't happen.
Senator Padilla.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And the fact that we're still discussing, debating the struggle to reconnect children who were separated from their parents more than 4 years ago today should tell us a lot about what to expect in the next administration. I think it's worthy of further conversation, maybe a different hearing, a different day to focus on that. Just as a reminder for folks that are observing today's hearing, that the topic, the stated topic of today's hearing is, quote, how mass deportations will separate American families, harm our armed forces, and devastate our economy. So I will attempt through my questions to bring us back to the focus of this hearing today. But first, I wanted to point out a couple of notes that I've taken throughout the hearing. In hearing from my colleagues on the committee, the issues they've raised, the questions they've raised, to underscore a statement I made at the outset, which is how complex this conversation in this policy area is. And so it requires thoughtful and nuanced solutions. Senator Graham was talking about the numbers, and even questioned witnesses of would you be opposed to someone who has had their day in court, he said, and has been denied a further stay in the United States after having had their day in court. That sheds light on process, due process, often lack thereof, representation in the process, lack of representation in the process. I'm for a process and finality of a process, a finality, an answer, clarity about your future in a matter of weeks and months, not years and years, but that requires investment in the process by the federal government, in hearing officers, in immigration judges. So let's just lay that out if we're going to be genuine and serious about tackling the backlogs and the issues. Second, man, if I had a nickel for every time I heard fentanyl in this committee, serious problem, but irresponsible in how it's misportrayed so often in immigration conversations. Fentanyl needs to be addressed, fentanyl needs to be stopped. Its illegal importation needs to be tackled. But if we're going to do it thoughtfully and seriously, let's look at what the Customs and Border Protection Agency tells us. 80% of individuals who are prosecuted and convicted for bringing fentanyl into this country are United States citizens. Happy to share the link, folks. Happy to share the report. So if that's a concern, then let's address the heart of the concern and not just use it as a soundbite to further attack immigrants. Oh, by the way, did you know that the numbers at the southern border are way down? People talking about this crisis at the border, crisis. We always need to do more to ensure a safe, orderly, and humane border. But some of these numbers that are being tossed around are not